When someone you care deeply about pulls away right after hurting you, it is incredibly natural to feel as though their silence is a final statement. It can feel like an icy, unspoken message suggesting that everything you shared together didn't mean enough to them to stay and make things right. Your mind may keep circling the same painful thought. If they truly cared, they would be here trying to fix this. That belief feels logical when your heart is aching, yet it often overlooks what may actually be happening inside the other person, especially if they are someone who struggles with emotional closeness and feels an overwhelming urge to withdraw when feelings grow intense. For someone like this, creating distance is rarely about suddenly losing feelings. It is not as simple as flipping a switch and no longer caring. It is not a clean, emotionless departure where they walk away unaffected. Instead, what drives them is often far more complicated and uncomfortable. Pulling away becomes a form of self-protection. It is like an emergency response that activates when their inner world begins to feel chaotic and unbearably loud. The moment they realize they have hurt you, something deeply unsettling rises inside them. It is not only guilt, it is the frightening awareness that they have been seen in a vulnerable way. That realization, that they are now the source of your pain, can feel terrifying to someone who depends on distance to feel safe. Suddenly, they find themselves in a situation where they are expected to repair damage, to be emotionally honest, and to drop the walls that usually keep them feeling in control. For a person who feels secure only when they manage emotions from a distance, that moment can feel like the ground beneath them has given way. Instead of moving closer to comfort you, they instinctively step back, searching for stability. From your perspective, that retreat looks uncaring. It appears indifferent, even cruel. It feels as though they do not value you enough to fix what they broke. Yet inside their mind, the experience is not nearly so straightforward. They are trying to quiet an overwhelming surge of discomfort they don't know how to handle. Space becomes their way of lowering the emotional noise. Often, they do this without consciously recognizing it. They convince themselves that distance will prevent further harm. In their thoughts, staying away feels safer, for you and for them. They might tell themselves things like, "If I stay close, I'll only hurt them again." Or, "If we talk, I'll have to face emotions I can't control." Or, "If I try to fix this, I might make it worse." In that moment, distance feels like relief, not a true solution, just a pause in pressure. This is where misunderstanding begins to take root. While they feel that stepping back helps them regain control, you feel abandoned. You are left carrying the weight of hurt alone. You look for reassurance, for apology, for acknowledgement that your feelings matter, but instead, you are met with silence. That silence does not feel like space to breathe. It feels like another wound. It is important to understand that when they retreat, they are not actively trying to heal the relationship. They are trying to calm their own distress. Healing a relationship requires leaning in, not backing away. It demands tolerance for discomfort, willingness to stay present, and courage to accept responsibility. It means acknowledging mistakes and rebuilding trust through consistent action. But when someone relies on avoidance, their focus shifts from repairing damage to easing their own emotional tension. In doing so, they unintentionally prolong your pain. There is often a deeper layer beneath this pattern. For many people who struggle with intimacy, closeness itself carries risk. It may feel like losing independence, becoming overwhelmed, or being exposed in ways that feel unsafe. When they hurt you, the stakes feel even higher. Now, closeness requires accountability. It demands facing the consequences of their actions. If they have never learned how to tolerate emotional vulnerability, retreat becomes their only method of coping. Ironically, in trying to protect themselves from discomfort, they create the very loss they fear most. They withdraw to escape unpleasant feelings, yet their withdrawal weakens the bond they are trying to preserve. This creates a tragic contradiction. They may care deeply, yet their coping style prevents that care from showing in meaningful ways. You, meanwhile, are left confused. Their feelings may be strong, yet their behavior sends the opposite message. They walk away precisely when they should move closer. This is why distance in these situations should never automatically be seen as clarity or final judgment. Distance often reflects coping limitations rather than emotional certainty. It reveals how someone handles pressure more than how much you matter. Still, understanding their struggle does not erase your needs. Compassion for their fear does not repair the damage caused by their absence. Even if their withdrawal comes from confusion or insecurity, the reality remains. Your needs are unmet, and the relationship remains fractured. The real question is not simply why they stay away. It is what you will do with the space they leave behind. Will you chase them? Wait endlessly? Try to fix what they cannot face? Or will you recognize that, at this moment, they may not have the emotional capacity to sustain a healthy relationship? Avoidance disguised as protection does not resolve conflict. it postpones it, and repeated postponement slowly erodes connection until very little remains. When we look beneath avoidance, we often discover something heavy and silent: guilt. But this is not the kind of guilt that motivates apology and repair. It is the kind that traps itself inside and grows darker with time. Instead of building bridges, it builds walls. For someone who fears emotional exposure, guilt does not inspire action. It sounds like an alarm warning them to hide. When they realize they have hurt you, their thoughts may shift quickly from, "I should make this right," to, "I am the problem, I cause pain." That shift can feel deeply threatening to their sense of self. They often see themselves as independent and controlled, not harmful. So facing your pain challenges their identity. Rather than confronting the discomfort, they retreat from it. Responsibility feels overwhelming because it requires staying present through tension, listening, acknowledging, apologizing, and tolerating emotional intensity. In response, they construct explanations that justify distance. They might believe returning would worsen the situation, or that their presence would only reopen wounds. In their internal narrative, absence begins to look responsible, even caring. But in reality, responsibility means staying, not disappearing. Guilt does not vanish simply because they avoid you. It lingers quietly, resurfacing in moments of solitude. Memories of you bring it back. Thoughts of unfinished conversations echo in their mind. Yet instead of motivating return, the guilt strengthens their belief that distance is safer. This creates a repeating loop. The more guilt they feel, the more unworthy they feel of repairing the relationship. The more unworthy they feel, the less likely they are to try. What you see externally is silence, but internally, they may be drowning in self-doubt. From your perspective, this dynamic feels bewildering. You likely view guilt as a catalyst for healing. You expect remorse to lead to apology and change. So when those actions do not appear, it feels logical to assume they feel nothing. But feelings alone do not sustain relationships. Action does. Apologies spoken, efforts made, conversations held. These are the foundations that keep connection alive. Without action, even deep emotion remains invisible and ineffective. Hidden guilt can be more painful than the absence of guilt. If someone felt nothing, their position would be clear. But when feelings exist without action, confusion grows. You sense something unresolved, yet nothing moves forward. That uncertainty can trap you in endless waiting. Over time, waiting drains your strength. Doubt creeps in. You question your expectations, your interpretation, even your worth. Silence begins to feel mysterious, as though it contains hidden meaning. But silence in this context is not neutral. It is the absence of repair. Understanding the reasons behind someone's behavior is valuable, but it should never come at the cost of ignoring your own needs. Compassion does not require self-neglect. Knowing why someone withdraws does not make the withdrawal harmless. Eventually, the reasons matter less than the results. And the result of unaddressed guilt is distance. Distance weakens trust. Trust, once weakened repeatedly, struggles to survive. Another deeply confusing truth emerges here. They may miss you intensely and still remain absent. For many people, missing someone creates motivation to reconnect. It generates movement. But for someone who avoids emotional risk, longing may remain internal, never transforming into action. They may replay memories, revisit conversations, and recognize the value of what you shared. They may feel the loss every day, yet fear still outweighs desire. Vulnerability remains threatening. The uncertainty of your reaction becomes overwhelming. So instead of reaching out, they live with the feeling privately. Missing you becomes a silent companion rather than a call to action. Over time, that longing transforms into memory, something remembered rather than lived. When you are no longer physically present, it becomes easier for them to idealize you. The conflicts fade from memory. The warmth remains. You become less a person and more a symbol, something beautiful but distant. Yet idealization does not repair relationships. Returning would require facing unresolved pain. It would mean stepping out of safety and into reality. For someone who fears emotional discomfort, that step feels enormous. This creates a painful divide between you. You remain rooted in reality, facing the consequences of what happened. They retreat into memory, where no accountability exists. In your world, action is necessary. In theirs, feeling alone seems sufficient. But feelings without action cannot sustain connection. Real relationships require risk, effort, and presence. Without those elements, connection fades in practice, even if it lingers in thought. This dynamic leaves you hoping that their emotions will eventually transform into courage. You hope longing will overpower fear. Yet change does not occur automatically. Feeling deeply does not guarantee bravery. Until emotion and action align, nothing truly shifts. A relationship cannot survive on unspoken love or private memories. Stability comes from consistency, not hidden affection. When all these patterns come together, the distance used for safety, the guilt that fuels avoidance, and the silence that conceals longing, you begin to see the core issue. It is not simply that they leave, it is that they remain internally divided. Two powerful forces pull them in opposite directions. One part longs for closeness, connection, and belonging. The other fears the vulnerability those things require. Both forces exist simultaneously, creating tension that never fully resolves. When they withdraw after hurting you, it is not always a decisive rejection. Often, it is an attempt to escape inner conflict. They step away to quiet fear, not necessarily to abandon love. But avoidance does not resolve conflict. It postpones it, and postponement creates cycles. Even while distant, they may still feel drawn to you. Quiet moments bring memories. Loneliness amplifies longing. Yet immediately, fear interrupts. Thoughts of difficult conversations resurface. The possibility of confrontation feels overwhelming, so they remain stuck, wanting connection yet fearing exposure. From your side, absence appears like certainty. You assume departure reflects decision, yet sometimes absence reflects paralysis rather than clarity. Their emotions remain, but fear immobilizes them. This creates a uniquely painful experience for you. You are not facing someone completely gone. You are facing someone emotionally present, yet physically absent. That contradiction keeps hope alive, making it harder to move forward. If their behavior were consistently cold, letting go would be easier, but glimpses of care complicate closure. You wait, believing patience might spark change. Unfortunately, time alone rarely resolves internal conflict. Growth requires deliberate effort. Fear does not fade simply because days pass. In many situations, the longer silence continues, the more difficult return becomes. Distance starts to feel normal. Returning begins to feel dangerous. Risk overshadows love. This is why it becomes essential to shift your focus. Instead of viewing their struggle as potential, examine their actions. Struggle does not guarantee growth. Feeling remorse does not ensure change. What determines the future of a relationship is not internal emotion, but visible behavior. Are they moving toward accountability or away from it? For people who rely on avoidance, retreat often feels safer than engagement. Regaining control becomes more appealing than rebuilding connection. Yet control is not connection. Independence without responsibility cannot sustain intimacy. Over time, emotional truth becomes divided between two realities. For you, feelings demand expression and resolution. For them, feelings can exist silently without action. Both patterns have origins in past experiences, but only one supports stable partnership: the willingness to show up consistently. Understanding their struggle helps explain their behavior, but explanation alone does not create change. Change requires effort, learning, and courage on their part. Waiting indefinitely for transformation places your heart in a vulnerable position. You are not only waiting for feelings, you are waiting for their ability to act on those feelings. And those are not the same thing. Ultimately, you may reach a point of clarity. You can see their fear, their conflict, and their longing. You can recognize that they are not heartless, only overwhelmed. Yet recognition does not mean obligation. You cannot build a life inside another person's unresolved battles. A relationship that constantly oscillates between closeness and withdrawal cannot provide peace. If someone repeatedly chooses distance when faced with difficulty, that pattern becomes reality, not potential, reality. Responding to reality means observing what they do, not what you hope they might someday become. Their actions communicate readiness, or lack of readiness, for commitment. Distance in this sense becomes information. It tells you that at this moment, they cannot offer the consistency you need. Accepting that truth does not erase care. It does not require indifference. It simply invites self-respect. You deserve presence, not absence. You deserve reassurance, not silence. You deserve someone who faces discomfort instead of fleeing from it. Real love is not defined only by longing. It is defined by staying, especially when staying is difficult. If they remain trapped between desire and fear continues to win, then the relationship remains unstable. You cannot carry both sides of that struggle alone. At some point, caring for yourself becomes the most necessary act. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you refused to stop loving yourself. You deserve someone who does not only miss you privately, but chooses you openly. Someone whose affection appears not just in memory, but in action. Someone who understands that love is not only a feeling, it is a decision made again and again. If they cannot make that decision, then you must make one of your own. Choose your peace. Choose your dignity. Choose the life that waits beyond waiting. Because real connection is not built in silence. It is built in presence. And presence is always a choice.